Today on the podcast, Perplexity AI is in hot water. There's a bunch of controversy. People are accusing them of plagiarism and a bunch of other things. And it's interesting, their CEO has responded to the allegations and some other people from inside the company. So today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down all of the controversy and what it means for AI models that are accessing the internet. There's going to be a lot of implications in the industry. Before we get into that, I have to tell you about my friends over at Econ Labs. If you're looking to take your online presence to the next level and create an amazing Webflow website, you need to check out Econ Labs. I recently saw this tweet where it was something like, if your website doesn't take me on a portal to another dimension, I don't even know what you're doing. And like, it's kind of funny. They had like a bunch of tweets of these different websites. And one of them was an Adobe website where essentially it's like, as you scroll, there's like all these crazy movie and animations and graphics, and it follows your mouse and whatever. So there's all this cool stuff. If you've ever wondered how you do that on a website, you use a studio like Econ Labs. I've actually left a link in the show notes to them if you're interested in contacting them to do a website, but also on that landing page, they have an example of what I'm talking about. One of these like cool moving modern motion graphics that also, as you move your mouse, it like follows it. So there's all these really impressive, interesting things you can do. They do UI, they do UX, they do SEO. So if you are a startup, if you're an agency, if you're an enterprise, you need to go check out Econ Labs. They can make you a stunning website. It'll be customized for whatever you're working on. They can turn pretty much whatever is in your head into a reality, or if you don't know what you want, they can do that too. So amazing studio, link in the description. Go check it out for sure. Back to Perplexity and what they're doing. So essentially, a lot of the controversy around Perplexity is surrounded around the fact that they are scraping, they're accessing the internet even when there's a robot.txt file on websites telling them not to. So it's kind of something that has been up until this point kind of like self-regulated, where it was really Google and Bing that were the big people that the big like companies people were concerned about. If you didn't want Google to scrape your website, you essentially put a do not scrape robot.txt file on your website, or do not, index, and Google would avoid you, Bing would avoid you, and they're robots, so they wouldn't do it. Now, most people don't do this because they don't want their website not listed on Google. This is how we make money. But when these AI models started coming out and they started scraping everything on the internet, people realized that this was a way that they could essentially opt out of being included in these LLMs. However, this isn't what all of the LLMs did. Now, with Google and Bing, they pretty much religiously follow this. With people like OpenAI, it's a little dubious, but I think they say they do. Perplexity definitely has not been doing this. If you have a robot.txt saying do not scrape, they go and scrape you. So this is where a lot of the controversy has come from. So that's one controversy. The second controversy that Perplexity is in this week is plagiarism. So they have both Wired, who's reporting that Perplexity has ignored their robot exclusion protocol. And there was a report done by Rob Knight. He conducted some research and pretty much proved that they were doing this. And then we also have Forbes that has another kind of complaint against Perplexity, where Forbes did this like special kind of profile on the Google CEO, Eric Schmidt, and how, he was developing these AI powered combat drones. So it was like a very specific interview that they did and only they did. And Perplexity essentially was taking that interview, if you asked it questions about that, and was copying and pasting, not just rewriting with an LLM, but it looked kind of like they were copying and pasting. Now, some people say it's fair use because it's just a piece of information and technically it was an interview, so he said something a certain way, so maybe they're just copying and pasting a quote. Other people said, no, they're just copying and pasting straight out of news organization. I think all of this drama essentially goes away. All of the controversy goes away if they make a deal with the news organizations, similar to what OpenAI has done. You see OpenAI making deals with Axel Springer and the New York Times and a bunch of other companies. And this is essentially where I think Perplexity could get out of this, because they're into a lot of drama and a lot of kind of controversy. Now, the controversy gets a little bit more interesting because instead of kind of apologizing, maybe saying they're going to fix it, it feels kind of like they doubled down to me. So they're kind of defending themselves, and Dmitry Solovenko is Perplexity's head of business, and he said, quote, "We're just responding to a direct and specific user request to go to that URL." So what he's pretty much talking about is these websites say like, don't scrape us, don't crawl us, right? The no crawl, I guess. And when someone goes to, Perplexity and says like, hey, tell me about Google's, Eric Schmidt's AI powered combat drones, and it's like going there, technically they are saying like, they have like text saying no AI models can access them, but Perplexity is saying it's just like if the user was going on Google or going to your website and searching on the Forbes website to go find it. We're just acting like on the user's behalf. So it's kind of interesting because no users are complaining about this. This is like straight up from the companies kind of fighting about who should be compensated. And on the one hand, you understand because Forbes makes their money from clicks on their platform, from people actually clicking on ads and stuff. And so if it's all getting shown up on Perplexity, there is no clicks. So what's the solution for this? There's a couple interesting things. One thing that Perplexity said that they will be doing is trying to make the citations a little bit more obvious. Right now, it's just like a little blue dot, kind of like Wikipedia, or a little blue number. I think they're going to try to make them a little bit more obvious so that it encourages people to actually click on them. But to be 100% honest, when I get results from Perplexity or even Google Gemini or others, if it just answers my question for me, I'm not going to go and click on the link. So it feels like maybe LLMs fundamentally are going to be taking away some business. So what are the publishers going to do, right? They go out of business, then we don't get, unique published or content published, and that would be a detriment to the end user, end consumer, if this content isn't being made because it's not monetized. So there's another path, and that is essentially what Perplexity is planning on doing in regards to revenue sharing. So they have some plans to implement advertising revenue sharing deals with a bunch of publishers, and essentially they're going to include ads alongside query responses. So you ask a question, it gives you a response. They're going to have ads on the side, and publishers that it's pulling from your site are going to get some ad revenue. This is kind of cool to me because if you are an independent journalist, this is not just for Forbes. I would assume they would open this up to everyone. And if you write some really interesting things that people are searching for and you're showing up and ads are showing up, you get monetized, kind of like YouTubers getting monetized. I think this would be the way to go. I think they would be doing it wrong if they only pay, the big publishers with some special back-end deals. I hope that doesn't happen. But they are planning some revenue sharing. There's all these arguments about fair use and plagiarism that are going on around this. One thing that I will say, there was a recent article over on TechCrunch, and they were kind of talking about some of the concerns that if these AI scrapers like Perplexity are going to continue to repurpose publishers' content, it's going to obviously lead to decreased ad revenue. I kind of talked about this, and obviously TechCrunch is a journal, so it's interesting. All the people criticizing it are also the journalists losing money, so it's not so much the users. Anyways, it might be a bit of a squeaky wheel syndrome or whatever, where these are the most vocal people. But I understand what's happening, and you understand that people definitely want to make sure that those publications are in business so we can keep getting news from them. As far as the actual CEO of Perplexity, Arvind, he essentially just came out and kind of acknowledged the issue, and he's the one that made the promise that they're going to make the citations better. That's kind of his solution to it. I think sometimes the citation accuracy has also been a little dubious, and there's some hallucinations and other things. So it's not like it's perfect, but I think, if they really do the monetization strategy and they make the citations more obvious, I think they're not going to have the legal troubles that they are currently sort of finding themselves in. Their head of business, Dimitri, said, quote, "Nobody has a monopoly on facts. Once facts are out in the open, they're for everyone to use." So this is an interesting, and there's another legal kind of attorney that was also commenting on this, saying, when it comes to fair use, so like with the Google Eric Schmidt interview, for example, like technically he's saying, I'm starting this like defense company and we're doing this thing. And like technically that's kind of like a fact. And so just because Forbes is the only one that got like the license to publish that, now everyone knows about it. So like, what's the difference between me reading that Forbes article and then me going and talking about it on this podcast, and then someone hears that and then they go, it's like a fact, right? And so it's out there in the open. And so I kind of understand, like, no one owns the facts of something that's happening. And Forbes is like, well, we did the exclusive interview with him. We should be the only ones allowed to talk about this. And it's like, no, because it's a fact. And he talked about it there, sure, but everyone can talk about it. And what's the difference, between other people republishing it? So that's where the fair use laws are kind of gray. And I think there's some attorneys that said Perplexity's case Perplexity would probably win that case in a court, which I think is pretty interesting. So the last thing I want to say is that Mark McKenna, who's a professor of law at UCLA, said, quote, "There are no bright lines." So Perplexity saying factually what an article says or what it reports would be using non-copyrightable aspects of the work. That would be just facts and ideas. But the more that the summary includes actual expression and text, the more that starts to look like reproduction rather than just a summary. So at the end of the day, to close this out, as long as Perplexity is just restating the facts from, even if it's in an exclusive article, they should be good. But if they're starting to copy and paste, which some people have said they've done, and pull things straight like verbatim out of an article, that's when they get into this fair use, and they got to make all these deals with the publishers and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Anyways, if you enjoyed the episode today, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to go check out the link in the description for Acon Labs. And if you're interested in getting a web design built, hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day, and I will see you next time.